In Laserfiche Cloud, how do we make it so our form dynamically responds for collection rows? For example, when we change the clearance dropdown, the denial reason hides or shows, or if we have the word arrest in denial reason, we get some subtext that comes up. In this video, we'll show you how to make that happen. All right, so here is our Laserfiche form. We have a approvals collection. In this collection, we have an employee single line field, a clearance drop-down field, which is required, and a denial reason multi-line text field, which is also set to required. And with that, let's get to our Visual Studio Code. So as our forms get more expansive, it becomes more taxing to try and remember all these form field IDs. So we are going to have some form field declarations where we assign constant variables and some kind of reminder name with the underline score prefix in it. Now, to get ahead of myself a little bit, this form will require asynchronous functions, and we'll be seeing that keyword when we define it. And basically what asynchronous functions are is that they can happen simultaneously at any one time. So all these things, all these functions fire off at once, and we don't care what resolves first. Now, of course, if we're trying to add or delete something and change a row, it has to exist first. So we are going to fix that by telling these asynchronous functions to await. So I'll show you that more. For now, we're going to do form subscriptions. This might look kind of familiar because we're going to call the function immediately when the page loads. So we're going to call our function for denial reasons, and we're going to define it under dynamic form functions. So we have that asynchronous keyword, the function keyword, to show that this is how we are defining our function. For denial reasons, we are going to pass the event parameter. We're just going to call it that. And then we're going to console.log this event parameter. All right, and events basically happen whenever there's on-field changes or some asynchronous function takes place, okay? Initially, there will not be an event, okay, because the form just loads. There will be no event. So in the case that there is no event, we know that form is just loaded. So we will have to make sure the form is reacting how we want it at the start. So we need to get those denial reasons hid because we only want that to pop open when somebody is actually denied. Then we need a justification for that. So we're going to first let the collection size variable, okay, that is going to equal LFForm object get field values method. We're not really concerned too much about the values, but we just get an array of objects, okay? And if this collection size, the length is less than 1, we know that collection is empty. So we need to add a set to it in order to manipulate the field. So we are going to await the add set, all right? That is an asynchronous function. We have to wait for it to resolve. And once we have that row added, now we can hide fields, okay? So we're gonna wait hide fields method happening on the denial reason because we don't want any denial reasons to show. And on the next line, we are then going to delete the set. So we've added the set, we will hide the denial reasons multi-line field, and then we will delete the row we just added because in this case, we'll say, you don't necessarily have to have a row for the form to move on. So it could be a 0 collection and some other things could be on the form. That's just how we're going to approach it. Anyways, Control A, select all, Control C, copy, Control V in your inline JavaScript in the JS tab, Windows left arrow, lock it to the left, pull up the console, F12, and you can see that indeed the form load does not have the denial reason multi-line field. So it successfully added the row and then hid it. But of course, we want to make this a dynamic form. So let's get to the second part of our scope. And we are going to add under form subscriptions, we're going to call the LFForm object and the on-field change method, which is an event. Okay, so that event will populate. We'll pass in the event parameter, and we will also make sure that the for denial reasons is the function that's called whenever the clearance dropdown is changed. Okay, so in the event that the clearance dropdown is changed, okay, we'll bypass the first condition because there is an event, so we don't need to execute the first block all over again. And then we will retrieve the options. So we'll make a variable called letFieldObject, and we will make this equal to an object that contains the field ID. So the field ID of what was manipulated. And then that's going to be housed in the event options. So the options should be just a single index array. That's why I'm calling the 0 on it. You'll be able to see that as is logged in the LFForm object. Now after that, we're going to also make sure the index is assigned. So we need to know what field and what row this is happening in. So we'll go ahead and log that in the console so that we can see for ourselves. And you will see which field ID and which index that the event happened at. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to determine how to hide or show the denial reason because the clearance dropdown is being passed through. Let's go ahead and assign the let status to a variable. All right, and then we will call the LFForm object, the get field values on the field object, okay, because we assigned it to the exactly what field was passed in the field ID and the row. We're going to make a switch for the status of the variable we just assigned. So in the case that is approve, okay, that is all capital letters defined within the dropdown. It's either all capital letters approve or all capital letters deny. We are going to await the LFForm set field values. This is an asynchronous function. Notice that I copied the field ID, the field object field ID, but we're going to actually change it to denial reason so we know what field this should be in this case. It should not be any other field. And we are also going to change this to field object index in that case. And then, of course, for the set values, we have to define what field happens first, and then we are going to set it to a blank value. So in the case that's approved, we do not want any values held for the backend validation. We want that to be blank. All right. Now we're going to hide the field once we know that it's blank. It's just good practice. We're going to break after that case because we do not want to continue processing the default case. Okay, we want it to break from the switch. Now we're going to copy and paste the hide fields function because we're just going to rename it to showed fields because it's exactly the same point in our form that we want. So we'll go ahead and copy all that, go to our inline JavaScript tab, save it, and we'll preview it. And then we'll go ahead and take a look and see if it is responding. And you do see, yes, it is responding. All right, so it will hide the denial field if it's approve or blank at first, or it will show the denial field if it's denied because we need a reason why this employee was denied their clearance. All right, so now let's add the second part of the function. And to do this, we're actually going to call multiple fields to a subscription. So we will actually nest our switch. So this switch will be part of a larger switch to find out what field ID was even called. So this switch will be field object.field ID. So when we get those event options, we'll be able to tell, okay, which field ID was the form just changed with. All right. So we have that switch instantiated. Right now, we are just missing the case. So of course we have to have a case of it, and it should be the clearance dropdown, which is the first case. That's initially what happened. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we'll also fix the indent a little bit because, yeah, it just looks nicer that way. And also fix the indent of the case, so that way it keeps a nice little nested format. So we can see the larger switch houses the smaller switch. So we're determining to switch between which field was passed and then what we should do once we have that information. I'm just going to copy and paste the whole switch case underneath. Of course, we're going to change it. So if it's not the clearance dropdown, then it should be the denial reason. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get the denial reason field value. So notice that we can also call the field object for that because we've grabbed all of that. Okay, now the only thing that we have to do, actually we're not going to just do that. We're going to actually specify the denial reason in that case. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a regular expression. So regex or regular expression, we're going to make sure that the word arrest is in our denial reason. Okay, in any case, that's what the I keyword of the test means. So we call it the test method on a regex on the denial reason, on actually what exists in that denial reason multi-line field at that particular index of what was changed. And now we'll make the switch dependent on the arrest value. So if it's true that it matches arrest in any case, we will change the field settings. And notice I copy and pasted everything. So rather than, so for changing field settings, we have a bunch of different properties we can change. For this, we're going to do the subtext. So we're going to make a reminder, please include the case number of the arrest. Okay. So that will go ahead and do that. And conversely, in the other case, in the case that arrest is not in there, we will just make sure that subtext never shows. So we'll just copy paste, and rather than the subtext having some text in it, we're just going to leave some blank empty quotes. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and make sure our break is out of the entire switch. So we had the switch between the two fields and the switch between how to process the events of whichever field was passed. Now let's change up our form subscription a little bit. So now that it can actually determine or distinguish between two different fields, let's put those two different fields in an array. So we have the clearance dropdown field ID object and the denial reason field ID object. And for each of these, we will pass in that field ID object. All right, and then we will make our evaluations. So we'll go ahead and move that exact on field change asynchronous function that we're calling from the LFForm object. And it's going to say pretty much the same, although we're not specifying the clearance dropdown. We are just going to grab the field ID property from whichever field we pass in. That's going to determine which subscription we're having. All right, so let's go ahead and copy that all. Inline JavaScript, Control-A, select all, paste, preview, and we'll go ahead and pop this open. Again, you can see the initial unload events undefined. And as we do this, you can see that we'll type in some text. Oh, yep, and it works on arrest. All right, let's try a different case. We got that T in there. If we throw in some all caps, you notice it still works. So it is working great in that regard. Now, let me show a problem with the way that's going on here. Let's clear this console. Let's hit deny. Notice that there's only one event and sub-event there. But if I hit approve, it duplicates because we've changed the field settings of the denial reason. So it's a duplicate event that really doesn't need processing. In a small form like this, it doesn't matter, but a resource is a resource. As you add more complex things, it's important to be able to stop when you want it to stop. So we're going to make a new section above everything else called form constants. Okay, so this constant is going to be called freeze functions. It's going to be an array, and the only thing this array holds is one value. It's a 0 or 1. Okay, 0 for false or 1 for true. Do we freeze functions? If it's 0, we're not freezing. If it's 1, we are freezing. So let's change our subscription now. Okay, so it'll evaluate, all right, if freeze functions 0. Okay, so if freeze functions is false is how it would read, but we're not doing that. We're actually finding out if freeze functions is true by adding the exclamation points. All right, if freeze functions is not true, rather, should be not true. Okay, so freeze functions being passed through, so you can see it all for yourself. We're going to fill it with true. So now, after if freeze functions is false, it houses false, we will actually fill it with true so that we can make sure that we don't keep processing this function over again. Now we're going to fill it with false on the form load after that, okay? Because if we don't, then once the form's loaded, our function will not keep processing. Of course, we're going to do it at the end of every case of the full. Technically, there would be a ghost return at the bottom of that, but of course, you don't need to specify it because it's just the end of the curly braces function. Let's go ahead and add a row. Take a look. Approve. Okay, we got 1 and 1. Deny. We got 1 and 1. And everything still works as expected. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll have links to all the helpful materials in the description below as well. And I hope you stay tuned for the rest of our series on and see our one-form use. Enjoy the rest of your day.